Hello, hello. Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 30-year veteran writer, illustrator, editor, talent scout, publisher of comics, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games. And it is a Q&A episode. And our question today comes from CBP Fan, also known as Comics by Perch Fan. Um, And it goes, a couple weeks ago, you mentioned that there are something you referred to as replacement comics, as in titles that can replace the popular brand characters and potentially fill the void when I get annoyed with or fed up or tired of the Marvel DC brand versions of the characters. What did you mean by this? Are you trying to say that there are versions of Superman, Batman, the X-Men, etc., being made, like John Byrne's Elseworlds X-Men series being sold out in the world or something? Well, not exactly that, although that is a cute thing. Yes, there are many people who do make free fanzines featuring the Marvel and DC characters like what John is doing, but that's not what we're talking about. But if you want to go seek that out, that's a great topic for another time. Maybe when I can find some examples of that, I can share that with you as well. But no, that's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is this. It's a series that is new to you, that may or may not be familiar stylings or nature to the title that you currently read or are becoming frustrated with for whatever reasons, and you're under the consideration of quitting that title, but you want something to replace that title when you plan to quit it. For example, let's say you are fed up with the X-Men because there's too many titles to follow, you haven't enjoyed the direction of the books, you don't like the current creative teams, all these and other reasons. Before you cut bait and run, you want to try and find titles of a similar vein or style to replace them. Now, how do you go about this? Well, first you have to really understand what it is you liked about the books, when you were enjoying them, and why. Many fans think that this is because they like the characters or because they like the creators, but every title has a base concept and a primary purpose to it if it's being done well, and that purpose is held consistently, and usually when that purpose and concept is deviated from is when the books go bad. The core concept of the X-Men, for example, is a group of young people banded together to learn how to use their powers and how not to be a threat to themselves or others while learning how to protect the outside world that fears and hates them from those who would abuse their abilities or would be destructive towards the world, in large part so that others don't hold mutants to blame for the actions of those destructive parties. That was the base core premise of the X-Men. This has since been expanded upon to a much larger scale with many different groups, many different aspects and approaches, but this was the core idea when it was launched in the 1960s, and it was carried mostly throughout the Claremont era of the 1980s, and it started to deviate away from that more and more after Claremont left in 1991. There are several different superhero teams over the years in the indie scene that have adapted this motif. Some are direct knockoff parodies of the X-Men in some ways. See Randy Zimmerman's The New Breed, depicted below on the left. You can see there's the female angel-like character, the wolf guy that's kind of like his Wolverine. He has a big growing guy that's kind of like his Colossus giant man. There's a guy named Bungie who's sort of a Mr. Fantastic type, Joker type, not Joker as the villain, but humorous, clown type guy. They have Strider, who's the guy with the helmet to the left under Tremor's fist there. He's like Quicksilver, he's a speed runner. Jinx has power balls, kind of like what's her name, Boom Boom, or Jubilee has her sparks, electrical bursts, and her powers jinx you in certain ways. That's why she's called Jinx. So there's different ways in that, but it's the whole concept. There's even characters that are deliberately named the same as characters, villains from the X-Men. So if you read that series, you'll see very easily where it comes from. They have a villains underground, like the Morlocks they have to face, all kinds of cool stuff. But it's very much an X-Men motif type book. There were 3 issues by Randy Zimmerman and Doug Lampirsky in the early 90s. And they were recollected in Zim's Heroic Tales in 2002 from Arrow Comics. On the right, now another example is that's more similar in spirit than direct nature would be Todd DeZago and Craig Rousseau's Parappanauts. As you can see from this cover of Parappanauts Into the Hollow Earth graphic novel, visually Aricia, the black woman in front, is analogous to Storm. Big, the guy steering the vehicle next to her on the right, is a beast in Colossus analogy. He's basically Bigfoot. Molly, the blue ghost behind them that you see behind her, is basically a Kitty Pryde analogy, and so on. But they are their own characters as well, and their adventures are more exploration and research to find cryptids than to protect the world per se, but there are clear similarities to them in the X-Men, and the characters are fun and engaging. But I liked the school aspect of the X-Books, you say. All right, then maybe Gladstone's School for World Conquerors by Mark Andrew Smith and Armand Villefort Jr. is more to your liking. The teenagers are the children of supervillains who seek out and kill their parents' strongest superhero foe, only to learn that their parents were always feigning their defeats on purpose. And by killing the hero, they've killed the Earth's defender against a much more dangerous threat, one that they themselves will now have to face. Both Parappanauts and Gladstones were published at Image in the past. Parappanauts was also published at Dark Horse. But they couldn't get traction from retailers and audiences, and are now crowdfunded series with the Haps returning to the mainstream, being available at Scout Comics most recently in the last 6 months or so. Well, if they couldn't get an audience, are they really any good, you ask? Well, let me explain something to you all about the comics retailer community. Retailers tend to be a largely lazy and inept lot who would rather sell you on a brand and a bunch of crappy comics and listen to you complain as long as that money keeps coming in than carry and market these kind of books to you out of the fear that if you stop buying that X-Men brand, you're going to stop buying all the X-Men books. These are, for the most part, standalone series, so there's only one title, one issue at a time. If you stop buying X-Men, you could be dropping as many as 12 to 15 different connected titles a month. No amount of sales for these individual titles is going to make up for that in their minds. So they don't order these books, and they tend not to promote these books. And then when the creators and their fans of these books confront the retailers on this, retailers will in turn try to blame the creators and publishers, claiming that we failed them marketing and saying there wasn't enough marketing being done on the books. Marketing that is frankly part of the responsibility of the retailer, and they are effectively the effective salesperson for any and all titles they choose to carry in their stores within their respective communities. Now, that doesn't mean that publishers and creators don't have a responsibility to market their books. Obviously they do, but it is a shared responsibility. And in my experience over the last 30 years, a lot of retailers are failing on their end and then blaming the publisher or the creator. So yes, these are all great comics for what they are, but when you can't find them because a retailer is spending their budget on umpteen spin-off brand books and won't order the book, you get frustrated as a consumer because you now have to take things in your own hands and start hunting for these and other books. Okay, that's X books, but what about Batman or Superman? They don't have those, do they? Funny you should ask. They do have those. Let's take a look at Christopher Mills' Atomic Pulp Comics Sleuth Comics featuring the Black Owl. Now, the Black Owl is a classic public domain superhero who was originally published in 1940, roughly a year after Batman. It's the same basic premise, a wealthy socialite who battles crime in a costumed identity. This character is featured in other versions by other publishers as well. Since the character is in the public domain, he's been in Project Superpower from Dynamite. He's been, there's Power Comics who do a version of the Black Owl as well. But this version, by Christopher Mills, captures the 1970s Dark Knight detective era of the Batman comics of the Bronze Age. Pictured here are two different covers for issue number 1. And then on the right, where he's also paired with Miss Fury, is issue number 2. You get them available at indieplanet.com, along with other great public domain hero comics by Mills and Friends. Let's take a quick look at what this book looks like on the inside. And this is what we have for the first 3 pages of issue number 1. And, it's basically a very Batman-esque story. You got a guy who's kind of like a red version of the Joker or the Riddler with a cane, with a devil's head. He's got his goons that most of the Batman villains have, hired thugs. He fights them hand-to-hand combat. As you can see, the guy's coming up behind him to sneak up on him and him with a cane. And this is written by Christopher Mills with art by Don Secrece, inks by Rick Burchett, and colored by Matt Webb. All 4 very well-established classic creators with decades of experience in writing and art in the business. So, quality stuff here. But you're generally not going to necessarily find this in a comic shop. You're going to have to go to indieplanet.com or look up Atomic Pulp Media or look up Christopher Mills on Facebook to get information on how to get that stuff, because the majority of comic book retailers don't carry it. Superman, well, we had Scott Rosema, who used to do a book called August from Arrow Comics, and he could always bring that character back if there was enough proof of demand to do so. Imagine a Superman who lives on a planet that's 10,000 times the size of Earth and has continents that are so far apart from each other that they don't even know the other continents exist. But he's aware of them because he's so powerful he can fly around the world and stuff. So he's got different races who know who he is under different identities and cultures, and they perceive him in completely different ways. Now, this was originally published in black and white when Arrow did it, because Arrow didn't have the budget to do color. But today, if Scott were to potentially relaunch this, he could crowdfund a book. He could do it in color. And the first 2 issues are already drawn. It would just be a matter of getting a person to computer color it and having people buy it. I bet it could do very well. It actually, if you go try to find these back issues in mint condition, high grade condition, they go for like $40 to $50 now. So it was very popular, but it had a very small run because of it being from Arrow and being a black and white publisher. It was just completely overlooked. This is just a small example of the kinds of books that are out there, folks. There's Carl Kiesel and Tom Grimmett's Section Zero, which covers Doom Patrol, Challengers of the Unknown, Fantastic Four type stories. And there's also Kiesel and David Hahn's Impossible Jones. Impossible Jones is also, both of those are kickstarted, but Impossible Jones is also out through Scout. And Section Zero did reprint through Image a second time, but we're waiting on Section Zero 1959 to come out, hopefully soon. Then there's Aaron Lopresti's Garbage Man, which is his version of the Swamp Thing, which he originally did for DC Comics when Swamp Thing was basically attached just to the Vertigo brand. And so when they moved Swamp Thing back into the regular DC proper, they returned the property to him, which was fortunate for him. They could have easily just kept the property. Dark Horse just released a trade paperback of this original story. They adapted it to remove Batman from it, so they weren't violating the copyright for Batman. And instead, Aaron introduces the Nightclub, which is another fun super team that Lopresti created many years ago that never really got seen, never got released. And so now they make their appearance in this book, and they're going to do a little bit more with them later in another crowdfunding effort later this year. You can buy this book from Amazon, Dark Horse Comics Online, or contact Aaron directly on Facebook if your retailer says they can't get it. In closing, the point I'm making is that when Marvel or DC characters drift away from us as readers, just as our friends and relationships do in real life, You don't have to dwell on the negative and be bitter and resentful about it. Instead, realize and embrace the fact that just like in the real world, where we meet and create new relationships, so too is the comics world. And there are many similar types of people in comics to be discovered. And even if these particular examples don't happen to tickle your fancy, or maybe superheroes as a genre has become something you're burned out on. That does happen, folks. Remember that comics are more than just one genre or one concept or property, no matter how much you enjoy that property, or no matter how idiotically the retailers cling to and market it as their primary content. That's all for this time. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. If you liked this episode, then do me a favor and hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from my channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. If you want to reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Lewis.BrightRaven, Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. You can see some of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven, exclusively on YouTube. If you have questions, comments, suggestions for other topics, Quoth the Raven, LBR72@gmail.com is the place to send those to. If I don't get back to you within a day or two, try lewisbrightraven@yahoo.com. And if you go for specific Q&A where you want me to answer on a Q&A, put subject matter Q&A or QTR Q&A. All right, then. That's all for now. We'll see you guys later this week. I do have, or later this weekend, I should say, tomorrow night, 8 p.m., we'll be talking about Gotcha Man for the third part, continuing our reviews of the classic series. And that'll be all for now. Catch you next time.